Well, welcome to Tuesday Together Talk. I'm Reverend Rebecca Burrow. I am the founder and CEO of Building Reconciliation, Inclusion, Diversity, and Gender Equity. To our friends, we are known as Bridge. Today is the culmination of a month of celebration for my late husband, Rufus Burrow Jr. And of course, you all know we had to reschedule from August, I believe it was August 25th or so, because of Hurricane Idalia. So anyway, we were blessed that we didn't have any real issues over on the Gulf side, and so we're blessed for that. But we continue to pray for those who lost so much during the hurricane. That would be our northern neighbors. So thank you all so much for being here on this Thursday for Tuesday Together Talk. Okay, now my guest, Dr. Lawrence Burnley, is going to be a little bit late coming in. So I thought that I would bring my partner in crime on this evening because she had the luxury of meeting my husband, and he gave her some advice that she continues to carry through her own work. So I just want to get you all in the spirit of things, because as we honor my husband, we also celebrate his life. I don't want this to be a sad occasion. I want for us to just enjoy thinking about who he was and everything that he left as his legacy for so many others. Now, remember, this is Tuesday Together Talk on Thursday. Y'all still got to talk back at me. So I want to keep asking this question. We've asked it throughout the month of August, and so I'm carrying it into this month as well. What is your legacy, or what do you want your legacy to be? So welcome my impromptu guests. Carrie Y. Hepburn Brown. She's in the car. She just dropped the children off football practice and cheer practice, I think.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. It's always good to be here.
Thank you, Carrie, for jumping on. Carrie, I'll talk a little bit more about Rufus a little later, but I know you can't stay with us too long. So I just want to get some of your initial thoughts when you first met Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. What was your initial thought?
You know, I felt like he was such an interesting individual. He did not say a lot. And I find that people who don't talk a lot, it's when they do say things, it usually is very important and significant stuff. But he had a quiet presence about him, meeting people that he didn't teach and those kinds of things, because obviously we had a different kind of relationship. I didn't have the privilege of, having him for a professor. And obviously I had a chance to meet him through you. And I know you alluded to one of the things that I remind you of now, and I actually tell other people. And so I just appreciate his quiet strength and the way that he really said things that were meaningful. He didn't just fill up air just for the sake of it.
Yeah. He was a very quiet person. And Carrie, you're one of the few people that met him when we moved. I moved back to Florida.
I know, it was a lot of people who was wondering who he was, who snatched you up.
Right. So Florida was not his favorite place, but I know we were working on a project together. You and I were working on a project together, and we were meeting at my house, and so you were able to come in and meet the quiet storm. So now that I know your first impression of him, um, I know that he gave both of us some
Yeah.
sound advice, but one day you and I were on the phone talking about some things, and he on very rarely would he ever chime in, but he did chime in.
Yeah.
And tell the people the advice he gave to you and how you continue to carry it now into your business practices, and not just business but just in life.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's applicable in a lot of ways. So we were, as you mentioned, we were working on a project. We were actually working on a proposal. And so for those of you who are familiar with the contracting process, a lot of times people ask you, can you do X, Y, Z? But they may not tell you, exactly how much the budget is. And so a lot of times it puts you in this, really difficult place because what rate you want to charge them. You don't know if they're gonna accepted and those kinds of things. And particularly at that time, we were fairly new into the consulting space. And although I felt like I had, I had a value to add, I didn't know what the quote unquote market price was of that. And so, he just said through the phone, know your value and trust that. And in fact, as a matter of fact, it's coming, and I've used it in so many different ways. One of them was a nonprofit that I was wanting to help to do some strategic planning with. And I was trying to, should I give them a discount because they mentioned they didn't have a lot of money. And so just from thinking through the process, those words that he said, what I actually did was I sent them an invoice with a full price rate and then put like a little asterisk. And I think I may have offered like a 10% discount, as an incentive. And since then I have gotten pretty good about remembering to charge what I think I'm worth. And I let people decide if they, want to accept that or not. Now, I am at a rate that I think is commiserate with what I am, what I can produce in my skill set, which is not necessarily what people want to pay me. But I have gotten to the place now where I recognize, one, my value, and the value of my time. And if people aren't willing to pay what I've said to them is my price, I don't take the role. And so I say that, I said that it is, I have used that to be applicable, not just in work, but in life in general. There are a lot of times, and actually you and I were just having a conversation today. And I was having a conversation with someone, I won't say who that someone was, but they had some concerns that they were sharing with me. And I said, I understand and I appreciate your, by the way, y'all, that's not my wife. I appreciate your, I hear your frustration, but I don't have the energy to devote to that right now. That's not something that I can concern myself with. There are a lot of things that are happening and I need to be focused on those. And so that principle of value, I just think it's so important, not only to think about the actual sort of dollar amount value, but the value of who you are and your time and what you bring to the table. And so if that means, in a lot of ways, I don't engage in conversations if I don't feel like it's worth my time and energy. And you've heard me say this time and time again, so I'll just give this to the TTT family for free. If people don't know a story, they will make a story up. I am not in the business of trying to convince you that the story you made up is not true. I don't have the time or the energy. And so I got to the place where my time was too valuable. What I knew about myself to be true was too valuable for me to engage in conversation trying to convince other people. No, that's not what happened. Baby, go ahead and write that story. Write a whole book if you want to. So I appreciate Rufus for that, because as I said in the beginning, he had this quiet strength about him, but the fact that he took the time to say that meant something to me. And as you already alluded to, I was one of the few people who got a chance to meet him and be in your home a couple of times. And I think that that's just a good lesson for all of us. I just don't have that same quiet strength about me. I just talk a lot.
Carrie, I appreciate you sharing and jumping on at the last minute. I think I called you at 6:25. Say, hey, can you jump on?
It's all right.
So I appreciate it so much because, as you know, over this throughout August, and even now with Dr. Lawrence Burnley coming into the studio, you are the only person that has come on and wasn't a former student or mentee. So I'm glad that the people are able to get a different an additional perspective that his investment wasn't just in his students, his former students, his mentees, and people that were close in his circle. He also thought about other people, and that's who he was. He was definitely
he
a person.
cared about people. Absolutely.
Right.
He sure did.
And he wanted everyone to live up to their fullest potential, but he definitely had,
sometimes in an aggressive way.
yeah. I mean, he was serious about his work.
Yes.
So, but he wanted for all of us to understand our human dignity and God's divine spirit in us.
Yes.
And part of that was the connection with the value. Know your value. If you are made in the image of God, if God is your creator, then you should know your value, and other people should treat you as such.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
You're so welcome. It's a pleasure to have had this opportunity to share. And I will just say, I've said this to you privately, but I will just say publicly, I am so proud of you. And what you have been able to do. It has been my pleasure to be able to walk with you on this journey. And I'm just so grateful to be able to witness and to be a small part of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you walking with me.
Well, I will be listening. Go off now.
All right.
All right. You guys enjoy it. I'll be listening from the backside.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now we have Dr. Burnley, and as you all see, he is not in his office as we had planned.
No, I'm not.
He's had several situations that have happened. Oh boy. So from a firewall that he couldn't get through to he went to the library, and from my understanding, they had to evacuate the library because someone came into the library with a gun. So he decided he would join us from his car. And I wish I could say you were our first guests that have joined us from the car, but we had another guest that had to join us in their cars. They were traveling back from Tallahassee one day, and they were traveling back. And so they joined us in our car. But thank you, Dr. Lawrence Burnley, for fighting the fight and persevering. And here you are.
My pleasure, Reverend Burrow. Thank you so much.
So before I introduce you to the people, I'm going to introduce them to your bio. Okay. So now, if you don't want me, do you mind if I share where you currently work? Is that okay?
Not at all. Not at all.
So Dr. Lawrence Burnley began working in his current position as Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Shaker Heights City School District in January 2022. Previously, he served as the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Dayton and Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Assistant Professor of History at Whitworth University in Spokane, Washington. He is also president and co-founder of Inclusive Engagements. Dr. Burnley, a native of Cleveland, Ohio, holds a doctorate of philosophy degree. He earned it, y'all, in history of American education from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's of divinity from Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in African American Studies from the University of Cincinnati. He is an ordained minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Dr. Burnley has led cultural immersion trips throughout the world and has facilitated numerous seminars and workshops with senior administrators, faculty, staff, and students in the area of biblically based understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion, intercross-cultural dialogue, and critical reflection on doing ministry in domestic and global contexts. Dr. Burnley was ordained as a minister in the Christian Church in June 1990. And his first book, The Cost of Unity, African American Agency and Education in the Christian Church, 1865 through 1914, is published by Mercer University Press. He is also a contributing author in Through a Racial Lens, a view of the social, economic, and political context of the 1969 merger agreement in Seeking God's Design, Disciples' Quest for Unity and Wholeness, and the civil rights movements and interracial unity within the Stone Campbell movement, in Slavery's Long Shadow, Race and Reconciliation in American Christianity, and the Stone Campbell Movement, A Global History. Dr. Burnley, you've done a lot. Okay, let me start there. And the second thing, let me say this to you. Having you, let's see, we started with Timothy, then Dr. Timothy Knight, then we had Dr. Susan Bond, then we had Dr. Nathaniel Holmes, and now we have you, Dr. Lawrence Burnley. I am so proud of all of you all. And I know that you all made Rufus' heart full. You all kept doing the work, and you continue to do the work. And you're doing, not only are you well learned, you all have really invested in your education, but you're also invested in your communities, within your churches, in your families, and you continue to do this great work that God has called us each to do. And I'm so glad that all of you, your example reminds us that education does not have to prevent us from doing the hard work that God has called us to, getting back in our communities and working and writing and all of those wonderful things that are important, especially now, to the Black community, to as folks are trying to extinguish our Black history. We are still so thankful and proud that folks like you are continuing to do the work. So welcome, Dr. Lawrence Burnley.
Thank you.
The Tuesday Together Talk. How are you?
I'm blessed and highly favored. I tell you, as you read the bio, just kind of teared up. It's a testament of God's goodness. And in a very real sense, that bio is a portion of Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr.'s bio. I'm here. Ultimately, to God be the glory for all the good things. But God used your husband, my friend and mentor, Professor, in such a way that I'm here talking to you, and that bio even exists. So, yeah. Well, it's funny. Rufus, he would say, when I say to God be the glory, or I'll say your praise be to God, he'll say, well, Burnley, you had something to do with it too. So you know that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, because I think he always wanted us to be mindful that we understand God is a sovereign God. We understand that God is our creator, but we also understand free will.
That's right.
And so we could easily, God, I'm not going to force myself on you.
Right.
I want you to choose me. And in doing so, making that choice to do the work.
Yeah.
It wasn't given to you on a silver platter. You had to do the work. And I believe that's what Rufus wanted you all to, all of his students to connect with, that you have to do the work. And when you do the work, you give glory to God, and you thank God that you had the in some instances you had the audacity to do this work,
Yeah.
so thank you so much.
How
Now
are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We made it through the storm,
Yeah.
and so I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
We still have a lot of work to do, and we'll talk more about the Black Church Leadership Program towards the end of our conversation. But I'm doing great. Let me stop
Good.
saying okay. I'm doing great.
Good.
All right. So let's go ahead and dive into our conversation. Now, I was able to get Carrie to share her first impression of Rufus. Tell me, what was your first impression of Professor Rufus Burrow Jr.?
He was a very powerful presence. My pastor, Reverend Dr. Timothy James, was my daddy in ministry. And after I submitted to my call to ministry here in Cleveland at Fifth Christian Church, I tried to go to a seminary part-time through Ashland's extension up here in Cleveland. It didn't work out. So Timothy James actually drove me to CTS. Walked in that building, and the first person I met with was Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. And I tell you, he was a powerful, and I would say intimidating presence, to be honest with you. That voice, just his physical presence. And I knew I was in the presence of someone special from the very moment that I met him. And it was like he looked through me, in me. But that was my first impression of seminary, was him. Tim had me set up to meet Dr. Burrow. He welcomed me there. We were meeting up there in his office. And I was mesmerized and in awe of this person who has such a powerful presence from the moment I met him.
Yeah, that is probably what has made this season of grief so difficult, because his presence was so intense and strong, and it's definitely, there's this missing piece, of course, to my world, but even who he was in conversation with issues and things for today that's going on today. That voice is missing. And I think that's what has made this season of grief all the more difficult, is that strength.
And I tell you, even in preparing for this, it's causing me to think about him in ways that I haven't in a while. I didn't anticipate this.
Yeah, I understand.
He was when I say he was intimidating, that was actually an attractive piece for me. He represented something in my academic career that I hadn't had in a long time, probably since my undergraduate days in Cincinnati. I was an African-American studies major with a concentration in history. That I went on to do a number of things, over the years. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s before I went to seminary. I actually left the church, went to the military. I was mad at the church. I was angry at the church. I was convinced that it was the white man's trick, to oppress, marginalized, minoritized people, indigenous people, brown and black people, women, all, probably when I went to seminary, I wouldn't have said women. I'm saying that now.
Yeah.
It's kind of Rufus has played a role in that too. But anyway, and so, but it was something there that said it kind of felt kind of like being home. It was engaging him. It immediately started to fill in a gap for me. Quite frankly, a void, if you will, because it was not just the tone of his voice, it was what he was saying. And it was immediate. I'm going to, please, if you feel free to call me Larry, I'm going to try to call you Reverend, but I used to call
Don't
you
call me Reverend.
Okay.
Back this
yeah, but it was that. And so I was kind of home there. And the idea of leaving Cleveland and going to seminary because of my son was in Cleveland. He was only 5 years old, 6 years old at the time. I couldn't imagine leaving Cleveland. But God had made it clear that to me that I needed to leave and commit myself. But Rufus was one of the reasons that was really drew me there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it brings up emotion. And I told the folks before you came on, I said, we're not going to be sad. We're going
No, it's not sad.
But I understand it's not even the sadness. It's not sadness. It is the thankfulness and the gratitude.
That's it.
To God for allowing an opportunity to have an encounter with someone that would help shape who you are. As professor, teacher, chief, and in ministry. So that's the piece that I want people to hear. And I want people to hear that because there's so many folks that listen to Tuesday Together Talk, and I've been asking this question: what is your legacy? And I want people to grapple with what is the legacy that they hope to leave. Now, we can leave money and all of that, but money sometimes won't survive one generation. Okay, that might even be pushing it, talking about a generation. It won't survive one, household. So what are you doing to leave your footprint? What are you doing to leave something that will carry through generations, that has had such an impact and added value to the world? What are you doing? Even if you do it in your immediate family, you might be leaving a legacy within your immediate family. So for me, one of the things, I was the first woman licensed and ordained at a church in Indianapolis. Since that time, there have been other women that have come, and I thank God for that. But also in my family, there have been other women. And so that's part of the legacy that I see. But there's still so much more that God will do through me because I know what God has purposed me to do. I just got to get to it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's interesting for me as I think about legacy in my work. I think it is bringing to the center of our social, academic, spiritual, intellectual discourses Blackness, our Africanness. It's creating experiences of various types that helps people, beginning with Black people, but not stopping with Black people, understanding the intellectual violence that has caused us to hate ourselves, to devalue ourselves, to buy into and to buy into this worldview that says that we're somehow subhuman, that we're less than, that the color of our skin, the texture of our hair, the thickness of our lips, the broadness of our nose is somehow cursed.
Yeah.
And so part of my legacy is to help us understand how education, formal and informal modes of education, is actually designed to result in an outcome of ignorance and blindness. And so helping us to see and understand and to fall in love with us ourselves.
Yeah.
And to do that in a way that not moves us towards lording ourselves over others, but to understand the responsibility God has placed upon us as vessels of liberation and redemption and vision and life and love and joy for all people.
Yes. Yep.
So it's the responsibility that we are awakened to in doing it. And Rufus, you know, he modeled what he was calling us to be. Right. And, you know, based on his understanding, what God, you know, ultimately, and I would use the word ontologically, was, you know, our human endeavor was to become, right, what God was calling us to be, and to understand and live in the reality of Ubuntu, you know, the South African term of understanding our interconnectedness, our oneness.
Yes.
To see each other. And so Rufus, he gave me the space. You know, I was battling in seminary, and he saw that.
Yeah.
And he gave me the space to do the research, to use my voice. He was the oasis in a desert. You know this, and I know a lot of our listeners experience this, that these institutions, education formally, in from, you know, K through terminal degrees, it's really designed to protect and replicate and advance positions of power and privilege for specific groups. It's designed to do that. And we're called, and he demonstrated this so powerfully, to understand, disrupt, and dismantle these systemic and institutional evils. I'll just use that term, that's preventing us, that creates barriers for us to become what God is calling us to be. And Rufus paid the price for that. I mean, he paid a dear price. I mean, even to the point of I'm sure that the pain and the loneliness in many times that he's had to undergo as he stood for us, for God, being used of God as a vessel of liberation and light. Rufus, I'm sure his health was a direct result of the wounds he experienced on this journey.
Yeah. While you were talking, as I was thinking about Rufus, Alice Walker came to mind for a couple of reasons. One, because In Search of My Mother's Garden, and then, but The Color Purple. And I was thinking about first time I saw The Color Purple, I remember a line, you know, Suge Avery said, and she said, you know, I think it pisses God off when we walk past the color purple and not acknowledge. And while you were speaking, I thought about how God thinks about his creation, his children, and how we dishonor God by not walking in the fullness of who we are as Black people, because we would rather assimilate and walk in the fullness of someone else's image. And this is going way. Okay, so we're still honoring Rufus Burrow. Okay, y'all know
Oh, yes, we are.
Listen, I was listening to Bishop J. Douglas Wiley Taylor, and he was preaching, and he said something that was so powerful as he's been preaching on these golden calves and things. But he said, why would someone make a god, little g, out of something that can't do anything for you or can't do more for you, or you know what I'm saying? And so as we're sitting here having this conversation, I'm thinking about the Black community, us as Black people, how important it is for us to return to our first love, return to God, and then to find that love, internalized love, the way we have unfortunately internalized racism. We have to learn how to internalize that love for ourselves and that strength and that power that we embrace, that has been given to us. And so anyway, okay, that would go on. Lisa says, I hope to leave a legacy of being an encourager while sharing positivity to others along all walks of life. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. And that is an important piece. There are so many people that, you go to funerals, especially as a preacher, you go to a lot of funerals, and sometimes you hear people struggling to say something kind about the deceased. And so it is so wonderful when people can actually get up and say something great about a person over and over and over again, and you understand that it's true and it's real. And Lisa, I know you, and I believe that is exactly who you are. You are an encourager, and you do give a sense of positivity. So thank you. She's been our group expert in our Tuesday Together Take Two private group. So let me move on to this next question, because otherwise we're not going to get too far. Now, you've kind of touched on some of this, but I want to know, how did Professor Burrow influence your work as a leading DE&I expert, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert?
I think probably the most profound way, at least what comes to mind immediately, is the hypersensitivity to see those who are often not seen, not heard, to have like a sense, a calling to see, and to commit self to understand my own blind spots that's preventing me from seeing others. It's those who are living on the margins and the minoritized, the least of these, if you will, the oppressed. It's having a heart for, but not only to see them, but to understand and think about and really combat, seek and dismantle those barriers, those systemic and institutional barriers that informs the reality of marginality, the reality of poverty, the reality of our stories and our narratives being electives and not required. Right. Yeah. And so it's that piece that, and also the work that I've done, I've worked at Protestant evangelical universities, Catholic university, predominantly white, fairly affluent community of Shaker Heights, where resistance to sustaining that which folk have built for themselves is extraordinary.
Yes.
And so his modeling for me what it means to stand in that gap.
Yeah.
And pay attention to those who God sends my way to help them see in themselves what they don't see.
Yeah.
And because that's what Rufus did for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I was going to be a pastor. Let me just give me, get a little degree and go preach somewhere. And Rufus saw something else that I didn't see. That I think part of me knew it was there, but he affirmed it.
Yeah.
And so this battle, this ministry around racial justice, issues around gender, intersectionality, and really kind of going deep into the weeds, what I call the messiness of diversity, speaking truth to power.
Yes.
He did that. And, he was our hero. He is our hero.
Yeah.
And he modeled that for us. So his handprint is all over me in this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was he really stood in equity, gender equity and inclusion, and it wasn't something he would just say. He lived it, and he also wanted his students and others to understand the importance and the value and our God-given responsibility to appreciate people, human beings.
Yes. And here's the thing. It was interesting because I've had the blessing of knowing him over a period of years.
Yeah. Just say a long time, Lawrence. It was
a long time. but I was able to observe in him not only power but humility. That he himself was growing. He's the giant and hero, but he was growing. I saw him evolve.
That's right. Yes.
I saw him. I think, I'm not taking no credit for this, but my research and looking at, is bringing to bear to the center, African tradition as authentic and valid resources. Somehow I think I, among others, influenced Rufus's thinking around that. Because I saw him emerge and grow and becoming more centered in Africa and African worldview and cosmology, and how he incorporated that into his own emerging theology. I'm sure there are a ton of other sources, but we had those conversations. I remember when that K showed up in his in the how he spelled Africa.
Okay, and so real quickly, say something about that to the viewing audience, because I need for them to understand what you mean about that K.
Yeah, I think for me, the way I interpret it, it's in that K, which many may miss. So I appreciate you pausing to give some attention to that. He was bringing Africa in antiquity, validating Africa's role in the civilization of the world, and at the same time critiquing centuries of racist, Eurocentric interpretations of Africa and romanticizing of the European experience and dominance and exceptionalism. All of that is embedded in that K.
Right.
He was bringing Africa to its proper place in the center, how God used Africa and African men and women over time to usher in really Jesus himself as the personification of God is an African reality.
That's right.
And so I think that was just one symbolic way of saying something very complex and profound.
Yes.
To the world.
Yes.
And I think it was a reminder to himself, quite frankly.
Right.
To do that. Something simple yet very profound.
Yes.
Very radical, very revolutionary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for those of you that are still trying to figure out what we're talking about when we talk about that K. It's the way that my husband spelled Africa or African. He put that K in there, and so a lot of times when you read his works, you'll notice it's spelled with the K. I remember the first time I saw that with the K, and I thought, okay, there's something.
Yeah.
What's up with this guy? But it really highlights exactly what you said. It's to bring attention to the motherland for real.
And it was regaining power,
Yes,
quite
yes,
frankly,
yeah, taking
to determine our own reality, to interpret our own story, right?
right.
And it was a form of resistance.
Yes, yes,
to Eurocentric hegemony, right? And
yes.
it was, I haven't really, your question is pretty profound. I haven't really stopped and thought about this in this way.
Yeah.
But it was, that was powerful.
Yes, yep, yep. Well, look, now, just so you all know, I'll call him Dr. Lawrence Burnley for the sake of this statement I'm about to make. Dr. Lawrence Burnley he is also one of our lecturers and scholars for the Dr. Rufus Burrow Black Church Leadership Program. He is the scholar specifically in the African history and history of Christianity in Africa and some of the other ones that you're going to teach. Tell me.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the history of Black history.
Yes. Yes.
And my dissertation, the kind of focus of my research was on the role of the Black church in schooling for Black people, and education for Black people, primarily through the Christian church, Disciples of Christ, but also the church more broadly, really analyzing and researching and understanding that role the church has played in the education, developing literacy. I mean, the invisible church during, in the antebellum South. So we trace that up to the present day.
Okay, and if you want to learn more about the Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. Black Church Leadership Program, please go over to www.reconciliationandequity.com, www.reconciliationandequity.com. It will, that particular program, the Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. Black Church Leadership Program, will be housed under Bridge for a short while. And so in the meantime, you can find the information there at www.reconciliationandequity.com. Now, Dr. Burnley, we don't have much time, so I want to ask this question specific to the Black Church and the Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. Black Church Leadership Program. We're seeing a lot of what people are hoping to do when it comes to dismantling civil rights, voters' rights, human rights. And we're also seeing a lot of rejection of Black history. I'm not talking about CRT, critical race theory, although there is a historical context to that at some point we need to have you to come back and talk more about it so folks can really understand what critical race theory is, because the way it's been explained is not what it is. But as I think about the Black church, or any church for that matter, because I think we have a shared responsibility as church folk, Christian folk, to ensure that history is told and that we learn from our history. What do you believe? What do you believe is the Black church responsibility as it relates to history and the teaching of history? And then what do you believe? Uh-oh.
Sorry.
What do you believe? How do you think that Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. Black Church Leadership Program can help bridge the gap between what a lot of our governments and political figures are trying to do as related to Black history, including our educational system, and what our churches need to do?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind, particularly when I think about Rufus within the Black church, is providing experiences of learning that helps us to think critically about the gospel.
Yes.
To be a church where we're not afraid to ask questions, and that we see that questioning not as a sign of disbelief, but of, in fact, the gift
Yes.
of thinking that God gave us.
That's right.
And understanding, which is really an Africanism, the relationship between feeling and thinking, spiritual and intellect. I mean, they form a symbiotic relationship, and it's not one or the other, but it's both and.
Yeah.
And in doing that, then we're able to begin to, I think, unearth the truth of the gospel, and at the same time begin to understand how the gospel has been used as a tool to advance the self-interest of people who have oppressed people all over the world. So thinking critically about the gospel, because I think until we do that, then the gospel becomes alive and a life-giving, empowering, transformative entity for us, an essential, critical, absolute necessary source for us to really be free. And then move the church to understand, the leaders to understand that this earthly journey is neither the beginning or the end of our life, but that we're here for a moment to be used of God to move us to a place where we understand, what is it, Matthew, I believe it's 10:39, when it talks about, and I'm going to paraphrase here, probably horribly, but but when we're willing to lose our life, that's when we gain it.
Yeah. Yep.
But if all we're doing is try to save our life, we've already lost it. And so the prophetic tradition of the church, we're here, you and I and the audience, we're here because we're standing on the shoulders of ancestors who did not let fear deter them from their demonstrated commitment to justice.
Yeah.
Because this life here is not the end of the story. It's only a chapter in it. Bill Hanna, that Rufus loved dearly. And he was my pastoral mentor. One of them, certainly Timothy James was as well. But he used to say, we don't die, we move from one room to the next room of life. And Jesus says somewhere in John, he's quoting, I believe, the Hebrew text when he says, he's making reference to Abraham and Jacob, Isaiah. And he talks about God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So the Black church helps us to regain that which was taken from us. This notion of community, this notion of our ancestors, the cloud of witnesses, it's a real thing.
Right.
I mean, it's real. And so to recapture that as sources we need in order to, again, love ourselves again, to be empowered and move again towards the spirit of Ubuntu, this notion of, you are because I am because you are. We are one. But we've embraced and internalized so many Western Eurocentric ways of seeing the world, and in many ways, the way the church has been, the gospel has been interpreted, it's actually working against us. So the Black church then becomes literally what it has been at its inception and what it continues to be today, a freedom center, a life-giving center, a justice center, a truth center, a balm to heal our wounds, but also that entity that calls us forward, to think beyond ourselves, and looking to what we are doing with what we have now that will bless those who are yet to come.
Right. Yeah. Wow. You just said something. You said a lot of something, but the thinking critically, it's so important for the Black church to really step that game up, that concept, that ideal of thinking critically. The reason why I say it's important is because let me just be totally honest right now. This is my thought. This is my opinion. This is my commentary. Take it or leave it. But what I've been seeing, what I've been witnessing with the Black church of late is a dumbing down of not all churches. Let me be very clear, not all churches, but I'm seeing this dumbing down the gospel and the critical thinking for the sake and replacing it with entertainment. And in that, it feeds that self-gratification, that self-need of being entertained, but it's not doing anything to transform the masses and transform lives. I said this to my friend the other day, Carrie, who was on earlier. One of the challenges I think that we continue to have in the church today is that too many people come to church to eat up all the food. They come in, they want to eat up all the food, and they don't think about, I don't need all of the food. I need to be willing to share. I need to be willing to share because there's someone in there. We got people that have been in church for 20 and 30 years. They know every scripture. They know everything there is about the Bible. And yet Sunday after Sunday, they come into the church and do the same thing. They eat up all the food.
And when you say food, I hear that as being more than just food that you eat. That we're coming in as consumers.
That message, that's right. Just coming in and instead of saying, let me eat what I need and then also share, making sure, that means I'm going to make sure that the next person, that person sitting in the pew, the people that we call the unchurched, the people that we call, that don't belong to a church, or maybe they haven't been to church in a while, whatever. I'm going to make sure that they get something to eat also. I'm going to make sure they get some food, they get some bread also. And unfortunately, what we have now is a generation of folks that go to church Sunday after Sunday after Sunday to consume and never give your tithes and offering. That's great. But also allow for somebody else to sit at that table and eat what they need. That means that we have to start being more than just a one-dimensional type of church. We have to have something for everybody, not just the same old Christians that come in every Sunday.
And I believe that the Black part of the role of the Black church is to help people see that person that they're sharing with is actually not someone else, but an extension of ourselves.
That's right. That's the Ubuntu. My humanity is inextricably caught up in yours, right?
That's it.
And
that's it.
That's what I think that our churches are missing now. And so we get so caught up. We have this great entertainment thing going on right now. And listen, if I see one more praise break video on YouTube or Facebook, when are we thinking about folks that aren't even making it inside the church doors? How are we feeding them? And so all of this, my ideology and my theology is an extension of that man that God blessed me to be married to. But how then are we able to make sure that we are doing more than just consuming? And in order for us to do that, we do have to become critical thinkers. What is God really saying in this text?
And that's part of the I think challenge of the Black church. Rufus, we always tell us, and I know he didn't coin this, but he would say, "You are the one you've been waiting for."
Yeah.
Well, we're also that's part of us. We are, we have this mantle to carry. It's not waiting for the next, Fannie Lou or Martin or Malcolm. It's we are the ones, but we're also the ones that we're struggling against because we've incorporated so many norms and values that are destructive to ourselves and antithetical to who we are as persons rooted in God, as African people. So before we get off, I think we have to talk about the concept of Sankofa. And this is the historian in me.
Yeah.
The church has to help us look back and recover what we lost.
Yes.
Because we have to realize, why is it so important for those who are wedded to are committed to our destruction? Why is it so important for them to prevent us from learning our history?
That's right. Yes.
Because they know that there's something there.
Yes.
There's truth there that will empower us and expose the lies that we've been told about how to see the world and how to see ourselves and our connection with that. There's gold there. There's richness, there's liberation in knowing who we are, because we can't move forward unless we first look back and see how we got to this point.
Right.
And even to understand this current moment, is that looking back is when you look at, again, our education. And that's why I'm in these institutions.
Yes.
It's core curriculum really hasn't fundamentally changed that much, right? Our histories, our stories are still electives. They're not required.
Yeah.
And now they're going beyond that.
Unless you're in Florida, they not anywhere.
Right. And so the church has to be that place, as it always was, when there were anti-literacy laws, throughout the South. It was the invisible church and those underground schools just teaching us to read the Bible, but just to read, period.
Yes.
Right. And the church has to be that for us. And to your point earlier, we have to lift up those churches that are doing that work.
Right.
I'm mindful, I was in kind of self-imposed exile from the church for a while. And I know Rufus was too.
Yeah.
He had it. He didn't leave God, but he left the institutional church in a sense.
Yeah.
He's the prophet. And I just thank God that God allowed my path to cross Rufus Burrow Jr. I thank God for
well, thank you, Dr. Burnley. And so the next time you are, and I'm saying to the Tuesday Together Talk audience, the next time you are in church and, you say, I came to get mine, and as long as I get mine, it don't matter. I want you to think about, just think about the gospel. The gospel was not about you coming to get yours and disregarding the other. That's some of the assimilation that we've done to individualism. But as you just indicated, Dr. Burnley, that Sankofa, let's look back and recap. We're not trying to recapture our youth. We're looking back to recapture the value and the honor bestowed upon us. And it's important for us to recapture that, because if we want to live in this world that, this, especially in this particular country, but all around the world, that don't appreciate or value who we are, we have to recapture who we are so that we can internalize our value and our worth. And we do that by knowing who we are. Gail write home and said, that was Rufus' sister-in-law. She said, good stuff. Rachel said, amen. Miss Rebecca and Lisa said, thank you for sharing, Dr. Burnley. So thank you all so much. So let's make sure that we do our part. That's the best we can do, is that we do our part of honoring who God has called us to be, and thinking about our legacy.
I'd like to thank you, Reverend Rebecca Burrow. I mean, thank you for the gift that you're giving all of us in creating not only this space for engagement, but the vision and the leadership that you're giving to the Black Church, Rufus Burrow Jr. Black Church Leadership Program. This space right here was a gift to me in ways I can't hardly articulate. Just to remember, to look back, and because it challenges me and it's calling me forward.
Yes.
And to write. There's a book that needs to be born in me, and Rufus Burrow is at Burnley. You need to write.
You need to write.
You need to write. And so I'm hearing that more and more. And so thank you for this gift. God bless you. And God bless us all as we continue this journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Burnley, for being here. And just of note, hey, Pastor Schaefer has joined us. Thank you so much for being here, Pastor Schaefer. Pastor James Schaefer, though, his wife and I, well, actually, we've all been friends for a long time. And thank God they were, we reconnected. Actually, they came to Rufus service, and that's when we had reconnected after losing touch over the years. So I appreciate them so much. But I thank you all so much for just hanging out with me once again for Tuesday Together Talk on a Thursday. From
a car in a parking lot.
Right. And we got a car and everything, this is how we do it. So thank you so much, Darlene, for tuning in this evening. I appreciate you all so much. And thank you all for coming along with me for a month of honoring Dr. Rufus Burrow Jr. You didn't have to hang out with me for this, but I'm glad you did. So to all of my guests over the past month, Dr. Timothy Knight, Dr. Susan Bond, Dr. Nathaniel Holmes, and Dr. Lawrence Burnley, I appreciate you all so much for just taking time out of your busy schedules and just sitting with me for a conversation for Tuesday Together Talk. Now, listen, y'all, we got a lot of stuff that we will need to cover coming this fall and into the winter for Tuesday Together Talk, because there's a lot of political moves that's being made. But I also want to continue this conversation on the responsibility of the church as we start thinking about community, as we start looking at the rollback of voter rights and civil rights and human rights, as we look at the judge deciding that Florida's redistricting map is unconstitutional and it needs to be redrawn, and we need to make sure we hold them accountable, because from what I understand, they're going to try their best to do. I think it was Alabama was the other one that was they were told theirs was unconstitutional as well, and they're trying their best to hold out. So we need to make sure that we hold people accountable. And then we also need to start thinking about November 2024, be here before you know it. And even before we get to November, we have a whole lot of work to do during this heightened political, anti-political, anti-democracy climate we're living in. So we want to keep these conversations going. But as we keep those conversations going, as we have some of those conversations, I want us always to remember to put God first. Put God first, because when all else fail, God is more than able to do exceedingly and more. Okay. So I want us to remember that in our work, in your efforts. And I want us to also, we talk about Ubuntu a lot. That's part of our framework at Bridge. But I want us to remember that as we encounter people in the grocery stores, at the gas stations, banks, wherever we go, Ubuntu, our humanity is caught up. It's inextricably bound up in one another, and we can't escape that. As much as some folks would like to escape it, we cannot escape that we are human together. Thank you, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, for reminding us of that. We are human. All right, so y'all hang out with us as we get ready to exit, and we'll go ahead and get our outtake done. I'm going to get rid of some of these banners streaming. Look, at some point, y'all, we're going to have to get us a technical person, somebody working this technology, because I can't do it by myself. Remember, keep following us at Reconciliation and Equity on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And then check us out at www.reconciliationandequity.com. Good night, everybody. And I love y'all much. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye. God bless you.